So just a little information about Patsy and what it's about. For many people who are joining in that maybe you're not aware of what the book is about, period. So it really follows a woman who migrates from Jamaica to the United States in hope of a better life. And also to reconnect with her love, her best friend, Cicely, who has been living in Brooklyn, New York for many, many years now. And Cicely had promised Patsy a better life in the United States with her. And also, better opportunities. So Patsy took the leap and came to the United States. But she also left her 5-year-old daughter, True, behind. Because of, again, in addition to her wanting more and wanting better opportunities, she was running away from the role of mother. Something that she never really told anyone. So she leaves her child, her 5-year-old daughter, True. And so the story follows Patsy as she's trying to navigate the United States as an undocumented immigrant, trying to do her best to survive. But it also follows True, her daughter, who also comes of age in Jamaica, questioning her mother's decision to abandon her, and also coming into her own identity as well. So the short excerpt that I'm going to read to you kind of summarizes what I just said in a nutshell, and then I'll just we'll start our conversation then. And this is just 1 minute, so it's really short. Yeah. And this part of the book is when Patsy's already in the US and she's really now realizing what she's up against as an undocumented immigrant. There are 2 types of devil's cold. One in which you cannot bring yourself to leave the room, much less the bed, to do the simplest things, and the other in which you go through the motions in a constant stupor. Patsy lies in bed, turned away from the dark heavy thing that has returned, its shadow dimming the room. With the cover over her, she closes her eyes, not wanting to see it. God knows how long she has gone without eating. She could die, she knows, though death doesn't seem that scary after all. Not as scary as the dark thing. Here in America, there are no bush teas for it. No bitter mix of ramgoat roses, rosemary, lemongrass, bissy, or other herbs. No pastor to come with a bottle of sanctified olive oil. No neighbor from the country who can wring the neck of a goat and sever it with a machete for you to bathe in its blood. No time to lie down and let it run its course. She's powerless against it. The real hell is allowing this place to eat you alive, Fiona says to Patsy, when she notices that she has been lying in the same spot on the bed inside their studio from sunup till sundown. How many rotations has the sun gone through since Patsy climbed in the bed that night after seeing Cicely? She slips in and out of sleep. She wakes to Fiona shaking her. Patsy, Patsy, Patsy! It reminds Patsy of her daughter's voice, how it would pull Patsy from the lips of a deep sleep. Here she's in the midst of it, hating it, terrified of it, and yet her only thought is of True. During those years, it was the anticipation of going to America to see Cicely that had kept Patsy alive. But what is keeping her alive now? Where will she find the strength that would protect her from the spells? How can she live knowing that she lost Cicely to her American dream? It's then that what Fiona had said about not having the luxury of choosing love makes sense to Patsy. That's what it all comes down to, choice. When has she ever been given a choice? Never. She has never been given a choice to say no the first time her legs were pried open. Never given a choice to rid her body of the grievance she had to carry for 9 months. Never given a choice to look at another woman and allow herself to be carried by the feeling without blood. Bright red on glistening glass, sticking to her like shadow. And now the promise of life comes with accepting the fact that she will never have a choice. That's it. Oof. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about Patsy, getting deeper into, who is this woman, why she came here, and especially know, what's going on here as we protest George Floyd's death, and knowing that, you know, here we're Black in America, we're immigrants or Black immigrants coming to this place, wanting a better life, but we end up dying. You know, the police don't ask where you're from before they shoot, you know. So, you know, wanting to know, I mean, get deep inside of the plight of the immigrants, like the mentality, why we come here in the first place, why people would actually leave their own homes to come to the United States, period. But then grappling now with the bigger dragon, which is racism, and still, you know, other stuff that we have to deal with, we have to grapple with, like Patsy, who now has to face that reality. And as you can tell here, she has this crushing depression that she's dealing with as well. So,
yeah, you know, one of the things that struck me when I was reading Patsy, which I found to be totally observing, was the range of things that you covered. And it really demonstrated for me what I find to be the most enduring quality of an immigrant narrative novel, which is that the immigrant experience is the human experience. And it always covers the complexity of living in two different worlds. And so what were the things that you were trying to convey through Patsy and her journey into the United States and trying to survive as an undocumented immigrant and also just trying to find happiness?
Yeah, to be honest with you, Roxane, I really wanted to tap into that working class undocumented immigrant, or that working class immigrant, you know, the one who comes here, doesn't really have any education, or is coming here for any particular job prospect. She's just coming here on this blind faith that everything will work out, that America will actually solve all her problems. You know, like many immigrants that came here, you know, including my father, who was undocumented as well. And so I wanted to document that life. I really wanted to put that on the page. The ones who would come here, for example, and, you know, end up doing the jobs that nobody else wants to do, but too ashamed to write home and tell their families what they're actually doing, what they're actually going through. So I wanted to really walk the reader, like, you know, hold their hands across this page of this woman trying to acculturate, trying to navigate her new realm. Because I really never saw a Patsy on the page. I felt like I wanted to see that. I wanted to see the people who were my dad's friends, to see that. I wanted to see the people who were coming here and they were just trapped. You know, they were in limbo, you know, running away from a country that never claimed them. And then, you know, in the heart of another country that doesn't claim them either, you know, as Black, as undocumented. And of course, in Patsy's case, which she doesn't say out loud, but also queerness, you know, depending on what part of the country she is. So all those things I wanted to stuff in there, or not stuff literally, but just put on the page so that somebody like myself, who, when I was reading books, I wanted to see that. I wanted to see her story.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, one of the things that struck me throughout the novel, oftentimes when we see mothers in literature, they're expected to love motherhood and sacrifice everything. And here we see a mother who makes the decision to leave her child and to really just live the life that she yearns to live. And also, I think, to find the love that she yearns for. And so was it challenging to write a mother who defies our expectations of what motherhood should be?
Definitely. At first, when I realized that Patsy was actually leaving, well, not even leaving, abandoning her daughter for a good 10 years, I was like, you know, to write a character like that, I had to dig deeper inside myself, you know, because it was challenging. I was also questioning Patsy. I was judging her a lot because, you know, being a woman in society, being a Jamaican woman, you know, you're told motherhood is everything. You know, you could accomplish the world, but then the question would always be there, you know, when is the child coming? Or when is my grandbaby coming? And so to defy that, to see, exactly, I know in Haitian culture, so
I'm Haitian American, yes.
Exactly.
A very popular question.
Yes, exactly. See? So for a Patsy to defy that, I was like, oh my God, what are you doing? And so it was a lot of back and forth. And then ultimately I was like, you know what, let me sit with this character. Let me have her lead me through or guide me. And she was actually able to open up my mind a lot. You know, she was actually able to teach me more about humanity, teach me more about women who actually they don't, that's not them. They're not inherently mothers. They just don't. I mean, it's interesting how the world expects all women to be mothers, to be good at it. But there are women in our society that doesn't happen for them. And so I wanted to tap into that, and Patsy was able to help me to tap into that, to speak to those stories that no woman, or not many women would be so forthcoming in talking about, even with her closest friends. And so I think Patsy gave me that ability to kind of just speak to that as well. And also questioning me too, because at the time too, I was kind of going back and forth with the question of motherhood and autonomy. And, questioning like, well, if you become a mother, does that mean you automatically give up who you are? And so with a Patsy character, realizing that, well, for her, she never had the choice in the first place. She was a young mother. She never asked to be pregnant. Abortion is illegal in Jamaica. There was nothing she could have done. And so in her mind, she thought Roy, her baby's father, would have been better. So those were the little things that she did. But I know for me to write a story like that, I couldn't judge her.
Yeah, I think it's a fine line that a lot of us who write fiction and nonfiction, for that matter, grapple with. How to not judge the character who makes a decision that you disagree with or that you disapprove of. And one of the things I admired, I loved Patsy. I just loved the book. I loved everything about it. And one of the things I most admired was that I did not feel your judgment of Patsy's choices, though I certainly judged Patsy's choices. I love it. Yeah, that was really well done. And what was interesting is that you showed a lot of just, people tend to idealize the immigrant experience, like that you come to the United States and you work hard and everything is okay. And you showed a lot of what the slog of working under the table and working for less than minimum wage, and like how do you make a life when you're making $4 an hour, $5 an hour? And to see that, this was one of, I think a really illustrative book in that regard. And so I was wondering, what kinds of research did you do to really just get that authenticity of experience on the page?
Yeah, okay, so I was always a curious child. So I would observe my father and his friends. My father drove a New York City taxi. And, it was always them talking about, when you're going to get straight, and straight in terms of, in the lingo is, when you're going to get a visa, a green card. And it was more like saying to myself, you know what, well, let me explore deeper. If I'm going to write a book about these individuals, I do have to do some kind of research, because I'm going to own my privilege saying that I'm an immigrant, but I came here for school because of my father taking that risk, right? And so for me, I spoke to nannies who were working on the Upper West Side. Some of them they were sitting in Central Park, and I just go up to them and speak to them. I didn't tell them that I was writing a book. I didn't want to have them not trust me as a person, but they did look at me odd when they were like, well, where's your baby? Is he or she playing in the park? And I'm like, no, I don't have a baby, and so it was actually a little awkward until my accent came out, and they're like, oh, but you're one of us. Well, which, interestingly enough, there were mostly Caribbean nannies at the park, and I was asking them about their day-to-day, what they love most about the job, what they resent most about the job. And so it was more like field work in that sense. And then also having cousins who are here as home health aides. They come to America, they want to be nurses, but they just don't have the degree or the paperwork. And so they come as home health aides. And so I'll talk to them, talk to one person in particular who came to our home. And she was very distraught in that, she could have gotten sent back home, given that she lost her job. And that's the devastation in that alone, going back home with two long hands. And so those are the kinds of research I did. And also, if you don't have a bank account, what do you do? If you don't have health insurance, what do you do? So all those things that I took into account as I wrote a book like Patsy, where she is definitely not existing, with a trace. She literally has no social security number. So she gets paid under the table. So like looking into things like that, like what happens when you are paid under the table? How do you, how much money does your boss take out, or do you get shortchanged for the most part? How do you pay your rent? You know, and also knowing immigrants myself as well, who, you know, they can't afford rent to begin with, so they live in rooms in a house, you know, be it Queens, be it Brooklyn or the Bronx. So wanting to get into the lives and, you know, write it as authentically as possible.
So one of the things that Patsy is pursuing when she comes to the United States, whether she can articulate it or not, is a connection with the love of her life, a woman named Cicely, who is from similar circumstances but makes really different choices in terms of how she survives. By marrying, she has a child, her husband is clearly controlling and abusive. She makes it work because she's a survivor, and that's what she does. And so I was really interested in the juxtaposition of their two trajectories and how they still have these common points of their love. And so what were some of the choices that you were thinking through when you wrote Cicely and her choices, and then also the relationship between these two women?
Yeah, very good question. First of all, Cicely, you know, given that she wanted this American dream so badly, and you know, for her, it was marrying this man who can actually secure a green card and get her that nice brownstone, the status that she desired. And so she chose that over the love for her best friend, for Patsy. And you know, that's another thing too that we don't really talk about as much as immigrants. You know, that choice that we make. You know, there was a part in the book where, you know, Patsy was told, you know, in America, you don't have the choice of loving. You know, for certain individuals who have to, who choose to marry for green cards, you know, that was something that people, it's unspoken, because you don't want anybody to be saying that you're not a real couple, so that you can't get your paperwork. And so Cicely chose that life, and ultimately she paid for that life. Marcus was abusive. But, you know, Cicely to me was the most tragic character in the book, given that, you know, before America, Cicely, you know, grew up in Jamaica as this light-skinned girl with light eyes and the long hair. And, you know, she was that kind of character who any Caribbean woman, you know, anybody from, you know, anywhere in the diaspora, you know, as dark-skinned black girls, socialized to want to be that, you know, to achieve that that look, you know, that light-skinned look. And so, you know, of course, that was actually our post-colonial scars, you know, in that context of Jamaica, especially, where, you know, she was looking at her Cicely as like, okay, she chose me as a friend, and that's important. And, you know, for Patsy, who already, you know, her self-worth was already diminished, for a girl like Cicely to look at her and say, you are my best friend, that meant everything to her. And so she followed her across the ocean. She did anything, first of all, before even that, she, you know, took exams for Cicely. She worshipped at Cicely's altar, fell in love with Cicely. And there was a blurred line with that, because there is, of course, it's platonic friendship, but there is like a borderline worship. You know, there's the romantic love, but then there's a borderline worship. So it's like it's blurred. Like, is Patsy really in love with Cicely, or is she in love with the idea of a Cicely? And so with that in hand, she goes across the ocean in search of this love, in search of this person, this woman who can grant her happiness, you know. And so that was something that I wanted to put in the book, like this friendship that's built off an idea, a concept of a person based on our post-colonial scars. And then now, you know, the American dream, you know, that Cicely ends up choosing to maintain that status as that brownie, that high trophy wife kind of trope kind of thing.
You know, it's interesting to see the commonalities in the immigrant experience, because at several points you talk about the barrels that get shipped back.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Where you basically send everything you can get your hands on to family back home. And we have something very similar in Haiti. And it's just interesting to see the commonalities and also the differences. This is clearly specifically a Jamaican story, but it's also an immigrant story more broadly, and a women's story even more broadly than that. So do you think about the broader themes that you might be addressing when you're writing a story that's also so specific?
Sometimes I do. I know for sure with Patsy, when it became apparent that there was a woman that was leaving the family, who was leaving everything behind, and it wasn't for altruistic reasons at all. I actually became aware of that what I was trying to achieve was I was actually trying to write against something. I was really trying to write against, yes, that altruistic immigrant, but also the woman who actually, chooses, she'd rather choose her own freedom than what the box society puts her in. And so when I saw that was taking shape in the novel itself, I was like, all right, yes, I'm willing to go with that, because ultimately, like I said previously, that Patsy taught me a lot in terms of opening up my mind, as well, and the courage to do such a thing, to defy societal expectations, to just to actually just move up to a different country and leave a child behind. I was like, well, you know what, that is choice. And when you think of the word choice, you never really think of that Black working class immigrant. You never think about that. And I wanted to give Patsy that. I wanted to have her say, you know what, I can actually take control of my own life, and this is how I can do it. She didn't have a therapist where she's like sitting in a chair saying, all right, how can I best do this? How can I best understand motherhood? All these things. She's like, no, so much has been taken away from me. I'm gonna now salvage my own freedom. And so actually, I wanted to give that to a working class Black woman. I really wanted to, given that society already has trapped us as mothers, as homemakers, period, across the globe. And so I wanted Patsy to defy all of that.
So today you won the Lambda Literary Award for Best Lesbian Fiction. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I was so glad to see it. Do you care about awards and those kinds of recognitions?
I used to. I would be lying to say, Roxane, no, I don't care about the awards. I'm like, yeah, there are times when I'll cry, I'm like, oh my God, I was not shortlisted or longlisted. But in all honesty, though, when I step back from all of that and realize that actually, when readers are getting more out of the book, then there's no need to be distraught over anything like that. I am big on Instagram, I'm big on Twitter, and readers would contact me that way, saying, thank you so much for writing this book. It happened with Here Comes the Sun as well, and even going back home and reading in Kingston, and seeing Jamaicans come out and support. I'm like, well, I'm doing something right. If my own people and people who don't even look like me or sound like me can come to the book and come to me and say, well, thank you, that means more to me than an award.
That's great to hear, because that connection with the reader is something that I don't think gets talked about enough in real ways, especially for Black women. Because we tend to write stories that don't get seen a lot. The stories exist, and there are plenty of people to write them, but they don't break through. And so it's interesting to hear that you prioritize that, because I find that to be a satisfying thing. I care about awards, I'm not going to lie, but I do care about what my readers think. And I always, of course, care most about what Black women think. And when Black women don't like whatever I've done, it's devastating. Like, I just take to my bed because I cannot. That's just too much. But, while we're having this conversation, your book came out, the paperback version came out on May 26th, but we've also been experiencing quite a lot of social unrest as people all across the country and even in some other parts of the world are protesting police brutality. And so what's it like to have to promote a book while the world seems to be burning?
Whew. Oh my goodness, you just asked like a loaded question again. I had a lot of ambivalence about it, honestly. Before May came around and people were, my agent, my editor, my publicist were like, Patsy's paperback is coming out. I got the box of the beautiful paperback. And I'm like, oh no, but how am I going to promote this? First and foremost, I can't tour, but then there's more problems. I mean, people are losing jobs. There's so much more to grapple with, and then protests. And I had to again dig deep in myself to say, I had to find a way to even within the book itself to say, why should people read this now? The why now has to be there for me personally, because it was me also looking out my window. It was me also looking outside and seeing people who, the Patsys of our society, who still had to be on the front line. They still had to go to work. They still had, and even if they were losing jobs, they didn't have the luxury like me to say, okay, I'm going to work from home today. I'm going to social distance today. They didn't have that. And when I first came to the drawing board to write a Patsy, it was because I wanted the world to see this woman. I want people to see this undocumented immigrant. With the face of the undocumented immigrant, you never see a Patsy. It just doesn't look like a Patsy, right? So to see now that this woman, these people go through, this is what the book does. And so for me now to say, okay, I'm going to promote a paperback based on that, well, definitely, I can actually do that with a clear conscience, because that was what my intention was from the very beginning. And so that helped a lot. And to answer your previous question about Black women's story, honestly, Roxane, when I write my stories, I write on faith. I have an agent who believes in me, and every single book that I push to her, and it's about to go to the publishers, I would say, Julie, please help me. And I literally, for Patsy's story, I'd ask her, please help me, because we all know our stories don't get read. It don't even get sold. Like, we know this. And so, I had to say to my agent, who believed, said, you know what? She's like, Nicole, I got you. I understand. Let me work hard on this. And she kept her word, because knowing that, it's just unfortunate. And even though, I watched the whole town hall discussions about, I'm bringing this back now to Black Lives Matter, and seeing the name men being killed, and Black women are erased. It took pushing sometimes to say her name, just say her name. And so as a Black woman myself, writing these stories about Black women protagonists, bless you, I have to be forceful, how to get our stories out there for people to care about Black women.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, that is the age-old question. How do we get people to care about Black women? What are you working on now? What's your next book going to be? Which is a really loaded sometimes, but sometimes it's like, you know what? I don't know. I just don't know. And so if that's the answer.
Well, the next book is all over the place. I mean, it's taking place. I mean, I can just tell you the geographies. Still in Brooklyn, and also some parts in Jamaica as well. But that's all I know for now, in terms of identities, and so it's all over the place. As I said, it's a draft, and I'm working hard on it, but trying my best to just stay focused. And so much is happening in the world right now. It's kind of hard to write. Mm-hmm. So I've just been reading other people's works and watching Netflix. For the most part.
Yes. A lot of times I get a lot of questions about, you must be writing so much. You're going to have 5 books by the end of quarantine. And it's like, I don't know if I'm going to have 5 words at the end of quarantine. What are you talking about? Like,
exactly.
Every single day something new happens. Like today in Los Angeles, they said that there was a quarantine at 1 for certain parts of the city and 4 for other parts of the city, and then 6 for the entire city. And I was just like, okay, so we're under house arrest. So just say that.
Right.
And I've spent the entire day thinking about that and having to talk about that to the media. And so I don't have anything else to write. I truly have nothing else to say. And so I totally understand that challenge of, sometimes it's just going to be Netflix and chill.
Exactly. And I don't beat myself up on it anymore. I'm just like, what? It is what it is.
What have you been reading?
So I've been reading, I read a lot of nonfiction, which is, believe it or not. And so there's this great book right now, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Souls. I hope I'm getting it right. Yeah, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. And it's a great book by Saida Hartman. And, you know, this documents the lives of these Black women who were, you know, through the 1920s and even before that, civil rights as well, who went against the norm. You know, speaking about gender norms, you know, going against that, you know, and how they were actually punished for it, some of them. And some of them were actually just more liberated than many other women who were in their same shoe. So this has been keeping me company during my daytime.
That's good. That's good. I know that we get to open it up to the audience for questions, and so I don't want to take up all of your time. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask them with the Ask Question feature, and we will ask them. Okay, I'm looking at the questions that are in there so far.
Okay.
Okay, this is a good question. What was your experience navigating the publishing process, especially since traditional book publishing is predominantly white?
So it was challenging at first. I got my fair share of rejections. And so after my MFA program, it was, you know, trying to get an agent, which definitely was a hurdle within itself. And then after getting the agent, tried to get the publisher to latch on. So with Here Comes the Sun, people were shocked. I had a panel with Center for Fiction with an agent, publisher, publicist, and people were actually shocked after that panel when I said, Here Comes the Sun was rejected by majority of the publishing houses. You know, there was no bidding war, you know, until one publisher, my editor, Katie Adams from Norton Live Right, said, you know, I can do this. I can buy this book and make it great. And actually, she, again, kept her word. And that was how Here Comes the Sun came into the world. And it ended up being amazing. So, you know, it's interesting now looking back and seeing the notes of the rejections that I got. It was like, oh, I don't understand. Why would a young girl be bleaching her skin? Little things like that, like the nuances, like, you know, not understanding culture, not understanding race, not understanding the classism. And so it was like, you know, I'm like, all right, am I going to be like this person in this put in this box of teaching, or of just being a writer, an author, which is what I had always dreamt of. And so it was a struggle, but then I'm so happy that Here Comes the Sun broke through the doors, and that was actually what was able to lead the way for Patsy.
All right, let's see what else. Has Patsy reached and affected people in Jamaica? I know, well, the question says, I think you're going to push back on this, and rightly so. Oh, yeah. I know it's pretty homophobic. Is it also hard for transgender people?
Yeah, Patsy definitely has reached people in Jamaica. I said this, one of the things, though, that I am aware of is that the people I write about, which are the type of Jamaicans, working class Jamaicans like Patsy, they would never come into a reading, a book launch. They would never be on this you know, Center for Fiction site right now listening to us speak. So you know what? It's always depressing when I think about that the people who are my heart, the people I grew up with, the people who you know, nurtured me, would never see this. You know, it's actually the upper class Jamaicans who are more privileged and literary for sure, who would actually who embraced me as an author, as a Jamaican author. And I know many of them are here on this site right now. But yeah, in terms of LGBTQ lives in Jamaica, it depends on where you are. It depends on your class. You know, me and my wife can go to Kingston right now and be okay, because where we hang out, you know, we have the means. We have the friends, the kinds of friends who are exposed, who actually, you know, can actually protect us. But if you're a LGBTQ person in the garrisons, right, or in Vineyardtown where I grew up, where people know your business and they kind of know that something is going on, you know, like, who is this woman coming over to her house again? That could actually lead to problems. You know, you don't know which neighbor is watching. And so I'm always aware of the class difference, the class dynamics. And, in terms of the trans folk, when I wrote True's character, who is gender nonconforming, I wrote this back in, the time frame was 1998 to 2008. In terms of now, a trans person existing in Jamaica, of course they probably can if they're uptown. They probably can if they're uptown. I still, I ask friends right now if a trans person can enroll at UWI, University of West Indies, and somebody asked me, and are you writing speculative fiction, kind of thing with that question. But they do exist. Some of them exist as homeless youths, so it really depends again on your class and your privileges, for sure. Just like the US.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because a lot of times people think that other parts of the world are radically different from the United States. But when you look at the murder rate for Black trans women here,
exactly,
and the hysteria over bathrooms that we went through like 2 or 3 years ago, like, let's not worry about the Caribbean right now. Your own world is a hot ass mess.
Right.
So, okay, this is on a different subject. Are you for or against MFA programs?
You know what? It's interesting. So they always ask that question. I taught in an MFA program. I went through an MFA program myself. But I always tell people that if you are a Black woman or a Black man or a person of color, you need your credentials. I'm very particular about having paperwork, from being an immigrant with my green card and then citizenship, and then to know my degrees. Because you know what? I'm always insecure that someone will look at me and say, you don't qualify. And if I don't have the proof to show them that I'm qualified, then I'm screwed. And so as a woman of color, as a Black woman, I needed my MFA. But if you have certain privileges, you can saunter into anywhere and not, if you're not lucky, I call that luck too somehow, because I can look at somebody who probably doesn't have any of that and could still publish a book. And I would say to anybody else looking at that and they can't afford a program, you can always read, you can always join community organizations, community writing groups, and you can be the best writer. Like, I've met more brilliant writers outside the MFA program than within the MFA program itself. So that can happen as well. But just for me personally, I always like having my credentials in case somebody questions and say, you don't belong here. I'm like, well, of course I do. Look, so just in case, there's always that anxiety.
9 million people, myself included, leave the United States. Do you think that the immigrant experience to the United States has changed? Is it valued as pyrrhic? I don't know what that word was supposed to be. And do you see or feel a shift since these stories were set in motion?
It has always been the same. I feel like the experience has always been the same. It's just that with this particular person in office, it just happened to be to get more media attention based on his stupid xenophobia. But always the experience has been the same. People have been getting deported from as far as I could tell. Being around my father and his friends again, there was always that anxiety, like, don't let the police catch you, or don't call the cops because you never know what could happen. So there was always that anxiety there. And so, yeah, when I was writing Patsy, I never even was thinking about that. First of all, that this person could even be in office. I wasn't even thinking about anything that would have happened now as we speak. And so I was actually writing true to what I had seen, in terms of my undocumented friends and family members, and, wanting to tell their stories. And so that was really what I was writing about. Have I seen a change? No, it has been pretty constant, I think. It's just that, no, it's just scary in terms of what a particular individual is doing in terms of publicizing, tearing families apart. And so that was really why a lot of people are now saying, wow, it's such a coincidence that Patsy came out with during that time as well.
Yeah, the timing is actually really fortuitous, that highlighted a lot of the issues that were happening in the national discourse about immigration and documentation and, whew, man.
Yeah, a lot.
It's just a lot. When Trump was elected, I know that a lot of us were like, especially Black people, where we were like, it's going to be really bad, and white people were like, democracy, and it's actually worse than
I can't even say his name. Like, I can't even say his name. Like,
I don't want to give him the attention. It's just like, also, I don't want to give him the legitimacy. Like, no.
Right. Right.
No. Do either of you have plans to write any speculative or fantasy? Thank you. That's a good question.
That's a good question. For now, I don't see myself writing speculative fiction just yet. Not to say it can't happen. My nephew has been pleading with me to write something that he would want to read, and he's a big fantasy, speculative fiction, superhero kind of, he just loves that kind of thing, fantasy. But so I never say never. So, but right now, no. What about you, Roxane?
I've written some magical realism and type stuff, so I've dabbled. I would love to write a fantasy. I've written a fantasy short story, and then I've turned it into a graphic novel that will be out in October.
Congrats!
But yeah, I would love to write a fantasy novel someday, because I especially when I was younger, I read a lot of fantasy, but I want to do it right. And so right now I'm just swamped, and I wouldn't have the time or energy to do it well. I don't want to be a dilettante and just do it because someone offers me the opportunity. I want to do it well. So eventually.
Yeah. It's amazing. I'm excited for it already.
Thank you. Let's see. What words of wisdom would you give to an aspiring fiction writer?
Ooh, I would say perseverance. It's so easy to give up. It's so easy when you see all the rejection, and even time, when you think about time and not having the time to write, and people would say, you know what, I'm going to just put this project down and never look at it again. I would just say perseverance, push through, keep asking yourself, why is this important to tell? Why is this story important to tell? Just keep asking yourself that, and know that what you're writing is important, and just continue pushing through. That's what I'll tell anyone.
I would say the exact same thing. My number one piece of advice is be relentless, because you're going to have to, if you're a heterosexual white man.
Yes.
Can you talk about your writing process? I know it's individual for everyone, but I always find it fascinating to hear from authors how they create. And can you speak about how you took Patsy from idea to manuscript? These are great questions, guys.
Yeah, amazing questions. From idea to manuscript. So I journal a lot. So when I was traveling on the subway, or when I was riding the Staten Island ferry to teach, I was an adjunct professor for many years. And so I'd use that commute to just write in my journal. And Patsy's story actually came to me just by observing the immigrants who were traveling with me during that time, the early morning trips I would take from Brooklyn to Staten Island. And it was just, just her writing a letter to her mother, dear mama, I'm here in New York City, I'm babysitting, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It was just a long list of things that she's doing. And so it was just a letter. But then once I start thinking about the story even more, I realized that actually this is more than a letter. This is actually a woman's story. And so I was willing to follow that story throughout. I happened to have had a residency during that time at Hedgebrook, and that was really when I was able to sit with the story and write and flesh out Patsy as a character. And True, her daughter, came to me in residency as well, and I ended up now having to navigate to balance the both voices. And I was happy to have the time to, or quote unquote, the luxury to do that in one summer. And so that's basically how it happened. I journaled and then had the time to sit with it and purge it.
All right, let's see. Oh, how do you ground yourself or connect to home?
how I ground myself. Wait, how I connect to home, how I ground myself and connect to home.
Yeah, or connect to home. Yes.
Or connect to home. I said last week in a conversation with Imani Perry that, you know, my writing brought me home. You know, it brings me home really, because for a very long time, I never understood the people at home. I realized for a long time that I was actually holding a grudge. I would really resented the fact that I had to leave Jamaica. I had to leave home, for various reasons. You know, people think it's the homophobia, but no, I wasn't even out in Jamaica. It was more like the classism, the colorism, all those things that I went through, and also feeling that I would not have really broken that ceiling, that working class concrete ceiling, if I had stayed home. And so coming to America, being here as a student, and then thriving, all those things, I still held on to that grudge as to why I left. And my writing helped me to cope with that. It actually helped me to understand the people more, understand that they themselves were grappling with questions, with demons, with our post-colonial scars. And so they didn't know any better. And so it helped me to understand them even more. And so when I actually ended up publishing Here Comes the Sun, I was invited back home, ironically, for Calabash. And again, now for Patsy. And I was like, wow, you know, it's interesting how now my books, people are now seeing me because of my books. And now I'm able to now love my people again on the page, and also now in conversation with them, you know, at these book signings. So that's really how my connection to home happens. And then I have to also thank my wife, you know, because even before I started writing, honestly, I didn't want anything to do at home. I was running for many, many years. And, you know, she's American, African American. And when she said to me, listen, why don't you go home? Why are you not showing me where you're from? It was that first trip back in 2010 where I actually was able to sit with all of those things I was running away from. And that was when I started writing truly. When I took out my journal and I started writing every single thing that I was running away from on the page. And so ultimately, it was a healing process.
Oh, that's amazing. Who are some of your favorite lesser-known Black women authors?
So everybody who knows me well knows I am a huge Toni Morrison fan. You know, I worship at her altar. Like, she gave me permission to do so many things, including writing Black women's sexuality on the page. You know, writing us in a way where we're not tropes, we're not, we're actually defying people's expectations of who we are. And just basically writing ourselves. And so she gave me that permission. Zora Neale Hurston, people would comment on the dialects in my book, you know, the use of Jamaican patois, or Jamaican as Caroline Cooper, Professor Caroline Cooper would call it. And, you know, for me to do that, it was actually Zora Neale Hurston that gave me that license, gave me that audacity to say, you know what, people will catch up. They'll slow down, and it will allow them to see the people and hear them as well. And so that was somebody that I really treasured. And then there was Paul Marshall, Edwidge Danticat, you know, those people who, you know, for me, who, you know, solidified me as a writer. I feel like I was like, wow, you know, they're there, they're doing it. I can as well. And then there's you, Roxane Gay. You know, I just love your work as well. You know, so I feel like many Black women opened the door for me to be here. You know, for there to be a Nicole Dennis-Benn, and so and Jacqueline Woodson, who is actually here in the audience, listening to us as well. There are many people I have to, you know, give their roses to.
Did you get pushback for how voice is conveyed in Patsy? And if so, did you apply the criticism that you received, or did you stick to your guns?
I never got any criticism really, because I feel like people at the time was already familiar with Here Comes the Sun. Actually got more questions with Here Comes the Sun because I feel like people were new to this use of Jamaican dialect within dialogue. But I've seen so many Jamaicans do it before that. You know, I've seen Patricia Powell, I've seen Marlon James, I've seen other Jamaicans who did it. But I never really got pushback on that. And for Patsy, I mean, there were a couple questions the copy editors may have asked, like, oh, you know, what's bulla? Can you actually define barrel? Because I had to realize that not everybody's familiar with barrel, so I had to explain that, but not over explain. So it was more like that. There was no real like tug of war or anything like that.
Let's see. Can you speak to how your time as a health educator influenced your creative praxis? Hi, Nicole.
Oh, wow. So you did your research. Man.
Soraya Jean-Louis.
Oh my God. Oh, Soraya. Okay, Soraya actually started my locks, by the way, everyone. Baby locks back in 2006. So Soraya and I worked together at Caribbean Women's Health Association, and at the time, Soraya was actually the first person to gift me Edwidge Danticat's Crick Crack. And that was when I started really like getting into Edwidge Danticat. I was like, oh my God, who is this? I need more of her books. And also we were working with women from Haiti, from Jamaica, from the Caribbean as a whole, who were immigrants who had, most of them didn't have health insurance. And, I really wanted to help these women. Like I also wanted to help the men I worked with at Columbia, the men who had sex with men, who have sex with men who are also HIV positive. I really wanted to help people. My whole goal in life was to be a doctor once upon a time. And so I realized, it wasn't my passion though. I couldn't see myself going to medical school. I couldn't see myself continuing on this public health path, but I did love writing. And I found a way to still do my part, to still play my part in helping individuals. Like the fact that I have a book, a Patsy, this is paying tribute to all these women I met while working at Caribbean Women's Health Association back on Parkside and Ocean Avenue. Back in the day when, I was just a little toddler New Yorker moving to here at the first time, still wanting so much to help my people. And so here when I'm incorporating what does one do when they're suffering from mental illness and not having the access, not having the health insurance, not having any of that, like how do they navigate a system or a whole country as existing within outside of the margins? And so I wanted to use my writing to speak to that, but not in a non-didactic way. Like, I didn't want to come off as that health educator in my novels. I wanted to speak to the experiences of these people in a way that people can actually come to them and understand what they're going through and hopefully do something about it. After the closing the book, they can go to their local council person and say, you know what, I want to actually start an organization or help somebody seek the help they need. And so that's something that ultimately I'd love to achieve by writing these stories.
Excellent. That's amazing. It's interesting because it's whenever a writer comes from a different background than straight academic, and to hear how that background is folded into the work is always interesting. One last question. Who have been some of your mentors, and do you consider yourself a mentor?
Yes, my mentors have been Marita Golden. She was once the executive director for Hurston Wright. She's been one of my biggest mentors. She was the first one who told me, Nicole, you're a novelist, write novels. Because I was sticking to my short stories, and she gave me that courage to branch out and to stay true, to take the risk. Another mentor I have is Edwidge Danticat. Actually, full circle. I reach out to her about any questions I have about publishing. And she's very generous with her time and the information that she'll give. Tiffany Unique is somebody else as well who I look up to, and also I look to as a mentor. And so I feel like these women. It's interesting, Roxane, because I'm thinking now, I'm like, wow, most of my mentors are women. Women in the game. And it was actually women who rallied around me, who came and helped me a lot. From helping to launch my books, here, like with you, to giving me the little nitty gritty about the publishing world.
Yes.
And so I wanted to do in return. I want to do something like that for somebody else. So now I run my workshop, Stylist in Writing workshop in Brooklyn, and many writers come to that. and they seek help with their work, but then most of them end up leaving, still being able to email me questions. Most of them now, some of them have agents. One just got into Iowa workshop. And, for me to now grow and now realizing that I myself have become a mentor means a lot, because it's interesting that I'm like, wow, I'm rejoicing all these things happening with my books and all these things, but I feel like it's more rewarding when I see one of my mentees succeed as well.
It is a very satisfying thing. I actually kind of find it more satisfying than my own successes.
Yes, definitely.
Finally, I've done something worthwhile.
Yes.
Nicole,
exactly.
This has been a real pleasure. And Patsy is a remarkable, remarkable novel. I hope everyone buys several copies and enjoys this book, because it's nuanced and textured, and it's sexy and romantic, and it's challenging and dark. It's just everything. And so this has been a real pleasure and an honor for me. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much.